Hello, and welcome to Coffee with Coach. Is your church a busy place with several key programs going all the time? If it's between 100 and 175 in worship, it probably resembles a garden. How so, you may ask? Stick around, and I'll tell you on Coffee with Coach. I'm Steve Petty, and I have 3 goals for these videos: to help you become a better pastor and leader, to save you time and money, to help educate, motivate, and energize you to motivate and energize your church. So, the problem is, how best can we understand the nature of our church so that we can lead it appropriately? As I mentioned last week in Collies, the idea for this series comes from a 1984 book, Looking in the Mirror by Lyle Schaller. You may say the church has changed since 1984. How can this be relevant today? Well, Schaller's examples are based more on the nature of leading different size groups. As the size of the church changes, so do its requirements of a leader. My purpose here is to help you understand the different sizes of churches and the different styles of leadership required. If you treat your garden like you treat your cat, the garden will die and you will fail. So come out of the garden and let's look at what it takes to grow some healthy, happy vegetables. If you find these videos valuable, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, and if you have questions or comments, you can add them below or you can email me at steve@revstevep.com. Today, Coffee with Coach is in the garden. Churches that average over 100 and under 175 are larger than a single unit. The first week we talked about Cats, from 0 to 35 members in attendance. The second week we talked about Collies, from 35 to 100. Both are single-celled organisms. Both are simple and easy to understand. But this week, it's a whole new thing: a garden. The middle-sized church can be found in about 15% of all churches nationwide, but keep in mind that we have now covered almost 80% of all the churches in the first 3 categories. Cats make about 27% of all churches, Collies 37%, and gardens another 15 to 16%. The garden is a more difficult and financially precarious size. It has enough members and finances to pay for a full-time pastor, and then some general staff, secretary, custodian, choir director, but not much more. The garden requires constant attention. Crops must be planted in season, and a lot more planning goes into the process. Which crops can be planted near others without harm or competition? Which crops have similar watering requirements? Which crops need room to spread out? Which crops must go dormant part of the year? When to fertilize? When to water? And the weeding is a constant priority, not to mention gophers, ground squirrels, and starlings. The pastor of a cat may decide to feed or not feed the cat, and it would survive. The pastor of a collie need only feed and water the animal and add a little affection, and it will thrive. But the pastor of a garden will find that the work is never done. Everything takes energy: planting, plowing, preparing, planting, fertilizing, watering, weeding, harvesting. Further, with several different crops all needing different schedules, a lot of forethought must go into planning how much time you can afford to give each one at any given time. The typical garden-sized church will have several groups within it that need active attention from the pastor. Committees that provide resources must be managed and encouraged not to drain all the resources. Committees that run the ministries must receive creative ideas, support, and resources. There is a larger call for the pastor to personally lead the new Bible study, the seasonal growth groups, perhaps even the youth group and the confirmation class. The pastor will be involved in all the pastoral care areas: hospital calls, in-home visits, calls on new families, evangelism with visitors, etc. There will be little financial help with specialty staff like a parish caller, youth worker, children's director, etc. So more often these are run by volunteers who will look again to the pastor for inspiration, coordination, support, and nurture. There may be a cat or a collie living in and around the garden, as well as the new crops the pastor is trying to plant. It is possible for the pastor who starts with a collie to learn to plant more crops and grow the church into a garden. The primary question will be how much personal energy does the pastor have to give the garden? Keep in mind, you cannot grow the collie into a larger collie. You keep the collie and plant a garden. One reality of 21st century life is that few pastors have this much energy. With increased health and benefit demands, the drain on the churches that must pay denominational support, the actual percentage of the pastoral support that comes in salary has continued to shrink. With less cash to support households, the pastor's spouse will often need to work just to make ends meet. This means the pastor's energy is divided into also doing childcare and household chores. Rarely will pastors have the 60 to 80 hours a week that it takes for them to maintain a garden, or the 80 to 100 hours a week that it will take to grow a collie into a garden, or to enlarge the garden into a house. The result of these forces in our time is that this size of a church devours most pastors. Pastors moving up the corporate ladder may do well with a cat, but that doesn't prepare them for the collie. If they learn to do well with a collie, they may assume that they are ready for the garden. But again, nothing has prepared them for the doubling or tripling of demands upon their time and energy, or the massive amount of planning and coordination required to manage a garden. So often we find pastors simply burning out at this phase and pulling back their energy into the few things that they have most confidence doing. When this happens, the collie in the church may still love the pastor, and though the garden goes untended, the church slides happily back into being a contented collie. The pastor will be happy with the love and affection of the collie and often have no understanding why the garden isn't doing as well. Numerically, the slide from a small garden with an average attendance of 120 to a healthy collie of under 100 is small, happens almost without notice. But the effect on the whole organization is devastating, as the financial options are reduced exponentially as the organization slides under 100. The organization may be happy, as the collie is happy, but it is markedly weaker. The ideal pastor for a garden is one who can manage a broad variety of tasks well, manage their time efficiently, be constantly encouraging and nurturing to all the leaders within the church, and plan and implement effectively on a long-range basis. Typically, effective planning for the growing garden means that plans are made, items are on the calendar, and committees have assignments 12 to 18 months out. This pastor also understands that full-time ministry in a growing garden is 80 to 100 hours a week of very hard, tiring work. Is your church a garden? If so, how well does your garden grow? I hope you found this video helpful. In the coming weeks, we will discuss the nature of ever larger congregations and how best to lead those increased sizes. Next week, we'll talk about the house. So again, I'll hope you will subscribe and like my channel and return in the weeks ahead to learn more about leading your church on Coffee with Coach.